Oh, ooh. Okay, commissioners ready? Okay, like to welcome the Board of Ed members. And you have a presentation here for us, and we would just like to, if it's all right with you, just go ahead and move right into the presentation.
Thank you, President Baker. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon, Commissioners. President Baker. Yes, the Board of Education is here to present its capital improvement plan request, and at this time, I'll ask Superintendent Michael and staff to make that presentation.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Williams, County Commissioners, we're here today to present our 10-year out CIP request. All I'm going to do is give a brief introduction. We were here earlier today, witnessed the CIP presentation to the County Commissioners. Our request doesn't look dramatically different than it has for the last 3 or 4 years. I think the challenge that we have is and somehow we have to figure out how to address this challenge, is the fact that right now we're on a 188-year replacement cycle for school buildings. I get asked frequently, when our building's going to be walled up with some of our schools that are open schools, especially with the security issues that are going on right now. 5 years ago, asked about Boonesboro High School. I said it was in our 10-year plan. That now has been removed. I guess I'm looking for some direction. Is it our intent to replace buildings 188 years apart? And if it's not, then we have to figure out what that would look like differently. I do want to thank Mr. Slocum and the team for their efforts to make sure that we at least right now secure state funding, which historically for the last 10 years has been about $9 or $10 million we received from the state. It's unfortunate in 2017 and 2018 we left about $10 million on the table down at the state that I'm positive we could have secured. That $10 million would have gone a long way towards what we call systemic projects to keep us ahead of deferred maintenance. So at this point, we're just asking, we want to share what our ask was for the county commissioners, from the county commissioners, recognize the challenge that you have, but also a real dilemma that we're in with this 188-year replacement cycle. I don't see how we build buildings cheaper and then expect them to last with that type of length. And if indeed that is our plan, then I think it's appropriate for us to face the community and say, when your building's built to be 188 years, people won't be here to see the next replacement. But I need to be able to say with confidence to them, we are not replacing your building. We're not modernizing your building. And then we'll just need to go into a different type of capital program of how we're going to just try to keep the buildings going for the length of time that they need to go. So with that, I'll just turn it over to Mr. Prue and the team here to share.
Thank you, Dr. Michael, members of the commissioners and staff. We've got a presentation for you today to give you sort of an overview of where we are, what's the nature of our buildings right now, what do they look like, what are the age of some of our major systemic structures. And we'll start you with just the current infrastructure. And as a point of reference, we maintain 1,100 acres of property. There's parking lots, athletic fields, the outdoor school, et cetera. And we also maintain 47 educational facilities. That does not include our facility, the Center for Education Services, or the facility at 820 Commonwealth Avenue, which is our transportation hub. And that's 3.3 million square feet under roof. So when we think about the capital that it takes to maintain those and to keep them running in an optimum energy efficiency, as you can imagine, 3.3 million square feet is not an easy task. From a preventative maintenance perspective, this kind of shows you our life cycle of age, of what we expect to receive out of a building, out of roofs, boiler systems, chiller systems, and so forth. I think the expected life cycle of a building is 50 years. And so to the point of Dr. Michael's statement of we're currently on, if we're replacing a building or renovating a building every 4 years, with the 47 buildings we have, it's 188 years to get through that cycle. So we often think back to 2008 when we opened Morgansville, Rockland Woods, and Pangbourne. They're brand new schools. They're 10 years old. They won't be slated for replacement till the year 2196, to put that in perspective for you. Dr. Michael also referenced money from the state, although this slide is a little difficult to see perhaps from a distance. I know you have the slides in front of you. You can see that in the blue bars, we've requested significant state funding over the years. The red bars indicate the amount of money that's been allocated to us through the public school construction program. And in FY17 and FY18, you see those bars are lower, where we put a lower ask than perhaps we had historically, understanding that there was not a county match in the county's budget to receive those dollars. And as Mr. Slocum mentioned to you earlier today, our ratio is 71% state funding to 29% state funding of eligible construction costs. That doesn't include soft costs like engineering and architecture. It doesn't include land acquisition and other things that have to be funded at the local level. And with that, I'll turn to Mr. Rollins, who'll talk to you about some of our major building projects.
Okay, within our plan, we had 6 major construction projects. You all are familiar with the Sharpsburg Elementary, which the county has started to fund in FY18. The UIP, of course, we're all familiar with. And then 2 middle schools and 2 elementary schools and some funding for some portable classrooms in the out years to hedge against enrollment growth that may come. The 3 columns represent the total cost is the total cost of each project. The next column, the BOE request, represents the funding we would have requested from that total cost in the next 10 years, FY19 through FY29. So that's why it's less than the total cost. For example, if you look at Fountaindale Elementary, within the 10-year period, we're only asking for $1,100,000 out of the $24 million total of that project. The third column, the county draft, which I think you went over this morning, contains what the county plan shows for that same CIP, with no funding for Hickory or Fountaindale or the portable classrooms. And also within the middle school projects, there is some expectation that the Board of Ed would fund from its budget some of those, a portion of those projects. So in doing the projects in this fashion, right now in 2019, we have 13 schools that are less than 20 years old, but we have 7 that are beyond 50 years and 27 in that mid-range. When you move forward using the Board of Ed plan for the next 10 years, you can see how the schools begin to age. We have 24 schools right now that were built in the 70s or earlier. So in this next decade, they're all going to be turning 50 or more years old. And that's why you see the jump in the number of schools that are above 50. Right now, as we sit here today, the average school age in Washington County is 32 years. After the next 10 years, that will jump to 39 years. And as we keep moving at the same pace as Dr. Michael and Mr. Prue have talked about, every 10 years, our average age of schools is going to go up by 5, 6, or 7 years as we move out. So we're sort of reaching that point where we need to think about how we're going to take care of these schools. With that, I'll give it to Mark to talk about the maintenance projects.
So as part of our capital improvement plan, we also have included the systemic renovations. And our capital plan that was submitted back in January includes the following 39 projects. As you can see on the slide, we have 13 roof replacements, 7 HVAC replacements, 3 chiller replacements, and a boiler replacement. As part of that capital, with the draft budget that was presented this morning, it looks that we'd only have 7 projects identified. And of those 7 projects identified, about 50% of that would go towards the Smithsburg High School HVAC replacement, which today is 53 years old. And we estimate that would be about $6 to $7 million for that project. So our average life cycle, thank you, Rob. Our average life cycle roofs are between 20 and 25 years. With our CIP plan request, and if we have the 13 roof projects that we requested, roofs over 20 years old would only be around 10. Moving forward with our boiler replacement schedule, with the 3 boilers that we have listed in our CIP, we kind of maintain, still climb a little bit in the out years to 20 to 25 years old, but we can maintain that. Along with the boilers is their counterpart is the chillers. You can see that currently we don't have any chillers over 30 years old. We only have 9 from about 20 to 29 years old. But in 10 years, even using our plan, We are at 6 chillers over 30 years old and 13 between 20 and 29 years. As part of the infrastructure in HVAC, the air handling systems, which actually provides the air conditioning to the students in the classrooms, with our plan, with the 5 replacement schools and the 7 HVAC projects that's in our 10-year plan, would give us a balance of about 18 to 19 schools that have HVAC systems that are over 20 years old.
In closing, I'll kind of close up a couple of slides for you. Bring to your attention the Qualified Zone Academy Bond. We've been able to save the county money over the last 10 years, approximately $4.2 million over the last 10 years, by obtaining this federal funding. And this funding actually was eliminated under the most recent federal tax plan. So this funding is no longer available. So you can see there's many boilers, chillers, electrical replacements, generator programs that were funded through what we call the QZAB program that no longer can be done. So those will now become capital systemic requests moving forward. This bar chart depicts for you through our out years, out through 2029, what our funding request looks like of both state and federal dollars, state and local dollars, with the state in red dollars, the darkest red being the building, the lightest red being our capital systemics, same corresponding color scheme in the blue for our local dollars. And we again, respect that we've got a significant ask in front of you, but we also believe we have a significant infrastructure opportunity in front of us as well for the county. To break it down for you on a per average annual basis, through 2029, our average annual request is $21,488,000 and change. That breaks down into a state request of just about $13 million, with 7 of it coming, so almost $8 million coming in buildings, another $5 million coming in capital maintenance. The corresponding dollars we are seeking from local government is an additional $8.5 million. And again, you can see the breakdown of $4.9 million in buildings and almost $3.2 million in capital maintenance. Again, to compare it to your county draft CIP that was presented earlier today, again, our average 10-year ask is $21.5 million. Your draft budget offers 11.5, and again, that's state and local dollars. So there is a variance between our two programs of nearly $10 million. And again, we respect that there are financial constraints within the county, but we felt it was imprudent on our part to let you know what infrastructure challenges we have ahead of you so that you truly understand as the elected officials that challenge that is in front of you as you also work with the school system and work with your county taxpayers. And with that, we're happy to take any questions you may have.
Questions, commissioners?
I have a question, I guess, for Rob. I noticed over the years, and I guess this is the contract, I'm not questioning anything, okay?
Okay.
Question. But I guess I've seen the new buildings being built, which are going towards more of a, I guess, a metal roof, correct?
Sometimes, yeah.
Sometimes. And that leads to my question. What determines on a cost basis? Because I know there's a couple counties in Virginia, that's a mandate. They have to do a metal pitched roof for
Right.
a variety of reasons.
Right.
To mostly get away from these flat roofs that start heating up and boiling in the summer, and really the repairs for them, they're nothing more than an insurance policy that they come in and fix them up for a number of years. But
Right.
what determines whether, what is it, the architect, or is it something you guys drive, or cost? I mean, what is it?
Yeah, usually, we do a life cycle cost analysis, which usually pushes you toward a metal roof because they last so long. You don't have to replace them maybe but once within a building's life cycle. So even though the first cost is higher, the life cycle cost analysis overall, it's less. Lately, though, because of the first cost being so high, we've gotten away from using metal roofs. At Bester, we used a shingle roof. At Jonathan Hager, we also used a shingle roof. Flat portions are done either with a single ply or a built-up membrane. That's driven by first cost.
But
We
it's
just we can.
still pitched roof. That's
It's a
what I guess.
pitched roof. Now, we used a pitched roof. One, it gets water off the building, which is always a good thing where we can. It also offers us space within that pitched roof to put our mechanical systems. Mechanical systems indoors stay dry. They last a lot longer. We have middle schools and high schools built in the 70s with air handlers that are indoors that are still running. I think Springfield is that way, Williamsport High, South High. So anyway, the pitched roof is two-purpose, gets the water off the roof, gives us interstitial space to put mechanical systems. When we do maintenance on them, we don't have to interrupt classwork or anything like that. We don't, we're putting mechanical systems in now that are very, what's the right word? Diverse. They have individual systems for each classroom. So you don't no longer have a big air handler going down and shutting down a portion of the school, or the kids are hot or cold. Individual classrooms might.
I think we have that here.
Yeah. So anyway, that's what's driving it. I hope that answered the question.
Well, and okay, so then let's go to replacement roofs. Same thing, or never have looked at the Acura system where you actually build up a metal frame on top of the existing?
Yeah, you know, I've looked at that a couple of times.
We've done that forever.
Yeah.
And we're still doing it with the individuals who want that manufacturing plant not to have water coming down through and
Right.
getting it to the edge of the roof.
Typically on roof replacements, we're using a structure that exists rather than to overlay it with something. We do put tapered insulation that puts some pitch to what would have been a flat roof or a almost flat roof to get the water to run to the drains better. But it's been sort of cost prohibitive for us to be able to try to.
But you have looked at it.
Yeah. Typically, schools aren't, in many cases, aren't a nice uniform shape that you can just put a
understand.
structure in. So that by the time you get through all that you'd have to do in the engineering needed to make that work, it becomes difficult. Yeah, we've looked at it a couple times in the past. Not recently. When we did, though, it just seemed to be cost prohibitive.
Any other questions, comments, commissioners? Yeah, I do have a question. On your last page of the slide, you have a request for 2019 through 2029. So maybe you have a graph in there, not just put the graph that you have in here with the numbers here. So if you were to be fully funded at those requests that you're asking, what does that do with the 188-year cycle?
So our plan, what we presented to you, if you just look at this 10-year plan, we have, excluding the urban improvement project, we have Sharpsburg, Western Heights, Springfield, and Hickory completed in the next 10-year cycle, and we're beginning Fountaindale. So we're essentially cutting that program from a 4-year replacement, or let's say a building every 4 years, to one every 2.5. We could drop that number closer to between 90 and 100 years to replacement with that additional funding. Is that the question you were looking for? Thank you.
And what should that cycle be?
I'll defer to the engineers on my team, Dr. Michael or Dr. Michael.
Oh, now he's an engineer. Wow.
Oh, no, I'm not an engineer.
I'm just kidding.
No, I mean, we say 50 years because I think when we ask the architects to design a building, that's what we're asking them to design a building for, is 50 years. I think some of our challenge is, as Mr. Rollins pointed out, a lot of our buildings built in the 70s, including Boonesboro High School, when it was renovated in the mid-70s. I was there yesterday, sitting quietly in one room. I could hear not only the instructor in that room, I could hear the instructor in the room right next door, even though there's a wall divider. But the only way you could seek state money at that time was to do open schools. So when Boonesboro was renovated, the best I recall, they put more of a folding partition between the rooms. We went back and did some drywall work to try to seal that up a little bit, but it's not adequate. I could hear every word in the next room, even though there's a divider. But that school appears to be walled up, but it's not done properly. But we have 11 or 12 completely open school buildings, or we have partial walls, like 4-foot walls, 5-foot walls. The challenge is the building's built for 50 years, but sometimes codes and things like that have changed. Smithburg High School has very, very steep ramps, way out of compliance. Springfield Middle School, way out of compliance with ADA issues. Smithburg Middle School's got a ceiling height when you come up out of the encore areas that actually I can hit my head on. It absolutely, how it got passed or approved, I have absolutely no idea. But absolutely, I mean, there is one hallway. It's not just a doorway. You know, it's a 6 or 8 foot hallway that's that that low. I'm about to say anything about Bart, but you know, you physically feel like you need to duck. Rob absolutely would crack his head on that. But there's things like that that happen over time. There's educational things that change, so the need for the rooms to change and things like that. I think at this point in time, based on where we are with CIP, I don't think it's realistic that we're going to be able to keep up with a 50-year replacement cycle. Ideally, we should open a new school every year. That would wipe off a lot of old maintenance projects as well. You know, we're still fighting asbestos. We have floor tile that, you know, as soon as you look down and see that 9x9 tile, you know you have asbestos tile more likely. Asbestos in our pipe wrap, all those kind of things. You know, as we deal with those things, we try to remove those types of things. But, you know, those are reasons that you try to deal with some of this stuff as you go. Ideally, every 50 years, realistically, maybe for Washington County, if we could just, you know, shoot for 75 or 80 years that we'd replace schools, might be something to think about. But then I think as we think that way, we need to think about how we construct the building from the beginning. Seeing a lot of tile floors have been put down, they already need to come up. You know, they're not going to last 50 years. You're going to have to plan on floor replacement. We've eliminated a lot of carpet. We're going back with tile, even though you got sound issues and some things like that. But, you know, we can clean tile and sterilize tile where it's really difficult to do that with something like carpet. So I think, again, it's just a choice of what we want our buildings to look like. I think the buildings that I went to school in, I think they were built in the 20s. I mean, they look like old buildings when they were replaced in the 70s, probably 50, 60 years after they were built. It's not that we can't teach in these buildings as long as we keep them clean and functional, but we've got to keep a roof over them. We've got to keep heat, cooling, airflow. We got to deal with health issues, things like that. But we're also going to have public perception as an economic driver here for Washington County. Our schools look like they're 100 years old. Is that going to help drive economic development in Washington County? So just all things we need to balance. And again, I applaud Mr. Slocum, Sarah, and the team for at least trying to address what appears to be the pattern that we're getting from the state. But most counties that are of our size are contributing well beyond. They don't wait for the state to contribute to every project. They definitely take advantage of the state money, but then they move forward with their own local money to fund systemic projects and whole building and whole construction projects. The other thing, our plan right now, we don't have any plans or anything in here for the expansion of pre-K and the space needed for that, and or if there's any expectation of residential growth. So all that would have to be addressed if indeed we're to grow. And I saw something with the county plan maybe about a year ago. I think it was like 100,000 people in 30 or 40 years. So we haven't looked at anything like that in our plan. Right now, we're just talking about strict, how do we just kind of keep it going? About 1.5 million a year, $1 million coming from the state for our systemic projects. Again, the roof boiler chillers. As Mark pointed out, we have 39 projects in this 10-year span. What's there and available to fund would be 7 of the 39 projects. So that's going to leave 32 projects pushed back as much as 10 years. So it's not something we're looking for an answer for today. It's a challenge that has to be addressed. We cannot continue to ignore it. We'll be back next year this time with a similar presentation. And again, I applaud the efforts of county staff to try to at least get back and recoup the money we lost. The money we lost the last 2 years will never be seen again. It went to somebody else. The other thing, the other unknown factor is what's the state going to do? The state's talking about backing out of systemic projects altogether or reprioritizing how they're doing building projects. So the Knott Commission just came out. We're not sure how that type of thing is going to roll out. The new executive director of public school construction program has some different ideas of how construction will be done in the future. So we have all those unknowns as well we have to deal with going forward.
Jeff,
Just
I'm sorry, you go ahead.
Just quickly, there's one other cost item that I think, we're going to have to look at, all of us are going to have to be aware of, is safety. I mean, it's going to be a big issue in the next year or so. How do we ensure that our schools are as safe as they can possibly be? So, we have to build in, every time we do a new project, we have to build in something that costs money to deal with that. we've got to recognize and look at it. You know, it's there and it's coming, and it's going to be, you know, I'm not sure how much it will cost, but I know Rob and our guys will let us know very shortly, you know, what we're looking at. So I think for you, you know, from our perspective to you guys, that's something that's going to require some help from you and some work from us. So just a little heads up.
Does the superintendent of schools favor having teachers qualified?
I think I'll defer to the county commissioners on that. You know, I really don't have a comment on that. I think right now that needs to be studied. What I've seen, you know, really depends a lot on the culture of the community. I know in Texas and areas like that, it's difficult to say whether it's successful or not, because I don't think most of those schools have been tested. Fortunately, I say fortunately, but these things only happen once in a while, but that's the wrong words. We don't ever want to have a tragedy like what we saw 2 weeks ago in any
Well, I guess
circumstance.
when I look at that, I guess he was a coach that was there to control and to be the, I guess the man in charge of watching and hearing, but he was qualified, that type of thing. I'm not talking about maybe the classroom teacher, but just, you know, I believe it's been said best, if that person is available in the school, and the bad guys know that he's there or someone is there in the school, I believe it becomes a place they don't want to go, because they also, like this guy demonstrated, did not want to be shot. So,
I mean, right now, the thing that we want to address right away, we have 15 schools that we're still working on security vestibules. So we've been able to do, with the brand new schools, all of our new schools, we basically build a vestibule area, contains a person on the outside. They have to be buzzed into an inside lobby-like area where they still can't get to the school, and then either buzzed into the office, so it's a second movement to get into the office or a second movement to get into the school. We've also added security windows at the majority of those. That way you don't even get somebody inside the office. If they just need to drop off lunch money or lunch or a jacket or a note or something like that, it's just like a level of security. Obviously, if someone's going to shoot you once you're inside there, it's another different issue. But just even for disturbance or you know, somebody yelling and screaming, you can contain some of that so you can get some additional help. But we do have 15 more schools we need to address. Sharpsburg will be addressed with the new school. Barbara Ingram will be addressed with the UIP project. And then we're looking at doing design work on the remaining schools that don't have security vestibules at this point and redesigning those. We have a couple projects we're going to do yet this summer. So that's one step we're going to take. Have a meeting set up with Chief of Police here in Hagerstown, with Sheriff Mullendore here in the coming weeks. They've both been looking at, you know, how they're going to use their resources, how they can better support schools, you know, what our communication needs continue to be. But we're constantly, we have great partners in both the chief and the sheriff and our local municipalities and how they're helping to protect their schools as well.
I'd like to comment, if I may, on Mr. Maris's comment. Speaking personally for myself, I think it would take a very special teacher with some very good training to face down an armed intruder in a school. And I say that, and I don't want this to come out wrong, but I served in the infantry in Vietnam, so I handled an AR M15, M16 it was then, same thing, military version of it. I fired expert with it. After I left the service, I didn't mess with weapons very much. Occasionally I fired a friend's weapon. I don't own a weapon myself, but I don't know if, say, 20 years after I left the service, if I would have been up to the task of hunting down and facing an armed intruder in a school, not knowing what kind of weapons that individual had or anything. I just can't conceive of arming teachers to face that. I think you leave that to the law enforcement professionals.
Really work down there, did it?
Pardon me?
Really work down there, did it?
No.
I'll tell you what my thoughts have always been on that. I think many of our schools have criminal justice programs. I can speak because I taught at Tech High, and I know we had some retired police officers, law enforcement people already involved at the school. They've already had the training. So at the minimum, if we would, and I don't know how many schools have a criminal justice program. Does North High have one? I thought they were talking about putting one in at North High at one time. But anyhow, if you had criminal justice programs in your school, most likely you're going to have a retired officer or someone to that extent teaching that class. So they certainly would be qualified or have had the training and so forth. That's where I thought of. That was my thought. But again, we could have this discussion for days upon days. And
President Baker, if I may, currently I believe we have 10 school resource officers for 47 buildings that are serving students with educational services. That's hardly one resource officer per building. And some, as I look here, we have at least one who is on call for, I believe, 9 different schools. So my preference would be to have someone trained as opposed to calling in to service those who are not.
And that's what I was saying about the guy that was there that was trained but could not have a weapon. The big fellow that was,
Commissioner Myers, I don't know how much training would be necessary for a teacher to feel comfortable with that kind of responsibility, but that's a long discussion.
just a good thinker. Hey, if that was my grandson or my son or daughter,
Yeah,
but it is good that we start engaging in some
definitely
conversations
have
like
to
that.
have this
Thank you for bringing
conversation.
safety to the
If I
forefront there,
may,
Mr. Ridenour.
I
gotta
am
start.
trained with a gun, and I was a teacher. I shoot in competition, but I would never want to take a gun into a school and face that horrific situation. Too much chance of killing the wrong person, or obviously being killed yourself. I could not, in all good conscience, ask teachers to train. First of all, you can't just give them a professional development 2-hour program and say they're trained to shoot. It's something that has to be ongoing. You've got to practice. You've got the cost of the guns, the ammo, perhaps vests for those teachers to wear. There's no way I would ever want to arm teachers. And as far as the criminal justice, that would only be in high schools to begin with, not in all 47 schools.
Okay, any other comments, thoughts? Okay, again, thank you for providing us with the presentation, and it's all in Mr. Michael and Mr. Slocum's hands.
thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you.